Now guys, let me take a sip here. All right, so we're gonna go into the next piece, and this is something that really could be challenging to some people, but guys, believe it or not, it's coming very more and more popular, and that's Lambda functions or anonymous functions within Python. If this is a little bit of confusing concept to you guys, just play with it more and more. I always tell people the more you play with it, the easier it becomes, right? So that said, and with that preface to this, we're gonna look at some examples of what is a Lambda function and how can you go ahead creating Lambda functions, right? So we saw how we define function as def plus, say ab, all right, and then we can simply return a plus b, something like that. That was the traditional way of defining functions, but with Lambda functions or anonymous functions, it doesn't work that way. The syntax is a little bit different. So let's say we want to add or double a number, all right. How do we go ahead and do that? So in anonymous functions, we can simply say double, all right, and the syntax for that is Lambda. And what do we want to double? We're going to double a value, which is our parameter. So remember, parameters is x, all right. So once we take x, now we need to do something with x, right? We need to double x. So to double x is simply as saying x, right, times 2. So that's simply doubling that value, and that's it, all right. And now we can print double 5 as an example on the screen, and we should get a good old 10. So this, in short, is a Lambda function. So the first time people see this, it could be a little bit confusing to kind of read, because we're kind of used to the traditional way of functions. But Lambda function is just simply an inline function. It has to be one line. We cannot do this, something like this in a Lambda function, try to make them different lines. That's not going to work. So everything that Lambda function is really one line, and it always starts with maybe some scenarios where I'm going to show will be a little bit different, but Lambda, and then you specify your inputs, all right, and then you specify what you want to do with those inputs, and then it takes that and then it returns that to this value. So if I say double 5, then it returns, let me just say result, just so that we don't get it confused, equals to double 5, and I'm printing our result here, all right. So basically this is what we get. Now if I choose to say 10, guess what happens? Errors, because my Lambda is expecting just one value. So everything before this column here is what is my parameter, but now I'm calling the function. So this is a Lambda function, so this is not a variable anymore, this is a function actually, all right. It's anonymous, right? So I don't know why they really call it that way, believe it or not. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it's anonymous because I don't know for now, but this is just a Lambda function, and I can then call that function double and pass in my parameters. Here, if I'm passing in 2 parameters, it doesn't like that because my function is expecting 1 parameter, and we should get 30. All right, so this is the Lambda function. Let's see some more examples of Lambda functions. Maybe we want to make this Lambda function too similar to the way we did the plus, all right, function. So let's make a Lambda function called plus, and again, syntax is plus is Lambda, and then we want our parameters here, x and y. So these are 2 parameters, all right, and we want to return x plus y, all right. So we're simply going to return x plus y. And so if I come in here and I do plus 15 and 5, for example, so it's gonna take, so we're calling the Lambda function up and passing 15 to x, 5 to y. So it's gonna add 15 plus that, return it to this value, and that's what we're printing on the screen. All right, so plus 15 and 5, it seems to be giving us a result, and the question is, why are we getting a result? We're saying missing because my syntax here is wrong. All right, so it should be 15 comma 5 because I'm specifying the two values, not actually adding them. And if I run that, it gives us 20. So guys, so there you have it. This is an example of a Lambda function. And while at this, let me just explain what this Lambda function is doing. If we were to write this as a traditional function, so we're saying lambda x y, and then we're returning x plus y, and then we're calling it. This is exactly the same as if we went down and said def plus, all right, and we're taking x comma y, and then we're returning x plus y, all right, and then we go ahead and call x. So this is the same as this one line of Lambda function, and you can begin to see why this is becoming, some people kind of like to do this for you wouldn't do very complex things, I would say, within Lambda functions, but there are certain specific kind of tasks that Lambda function just makes way more sense than others, especially for iterative kind of tasks, for tasks where you kind of have to go through like a list of things, right? Because Lambda function can apply that across the entire list. Now, if that doesn't make sense to you, let's actually look at an example of where a Lambda function is being applied to a list. All right, now I have, for the sake of time, I have that pre-built already, so I'm just gonna paste that code to the screen and then just walk through the code. So for us to do this, we're gonna import a specific library to see how Lambda functions can work within lists. So we're gonna import the library. So from function tools, we're gonna import reduce. Now we set the list here, a very simple list, 1 to 10 within to this variable, and then now we have this Lambda function, and this Lambda function is going to, because we saw how Lambda functions work before, let's just read this the way it's written. So lambda x is gonna take a value x, all right, and then that x in our case would be a list. We're gonna send a list to this Lambda function. So whenever we call this Lambda function list, right, it expects an input parameter which is going to be x, and this is how we read Lambda functions. So it's gonna be x. Now we're doing something to that x, that list, once we get. Now what we're doing here is we're gonna check for every value within x, right? We're gonna take it and multiply by 2, and multiply that value by 2 and check, is it greater than 10? So 1 times 2, is it greater than 10? So this would result in a boolean because we're doing a conditional check here. All right, now and then based on that, if it's true, we're gonna put the result in so this is our input, which is x, and this is my list, so we're passing here, and it's gonna take that result and it's gonna filter that result out. So now we're filtering the result out. So, and it's gonna filter if this condition is not true, right? If it's true, then it's part of it. If it's not true, then it's in. So let's go ahead and actually call this function. I think once we call the function, that would make a lot of sense. So let's let me just comment this out. Lambda functions are very, very powerful, guys, especially in data science, where you have to work with lists, map reduce, and things like that. Lambda functions are really powerful for that. So let's run this and I'll explain what has just happened here, as we already started explaining. So we have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. That's our list. All right, now we've simply defined our Lambda function x, which is taking one up input, and that's why we're printing out so here we're gonna print filter list, which is our result. So Lambda is taking an input x, and we're passing that x as my list. So this my list is coming into x here. All right, so this is how we're sending my my list into x. Now what we're doing is going in and saying filter the values if x times 2 is greater than 10. So this is what we want. We want to keep any value where you take that value times 2 is greater than 10, and we're going through this list and we're applying this. 1 times 2 greater than 10, nope. 2 times 2 greater than 10, nope. 3 times 2 all the way to 5 times 2 greater than 10, nope. Right, 6 times 2, is it greater than 10? Yes. Now we'll take this that and we're putting it in this list. So we're gonna return a new list. So, and that's why our new list is gonna have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, because those meet this Boolean condition here. The first time I came across Lambda functions, it really did not kind of make sense, right? And I'm sure we're following along. It's maybe not making sense, guys, but it's a very, very powerful concept. If we had to do this with a for loop, we'll have to write a for loop that will iterate through that list. So for each value in X, if X is greater than 2, it will just be a very time-consuming thing to do. But you can do that very, very quickly with the Lambda function. All right, so a very, very powerful concept. Let's look at a different Lambda function here, very similar to what we've seen in here, and this one would be using maps, map function. So, and then we're gonna go ahead and print the map on the screen. All right, so I'll try again to explain this, guys. Just spend some time and follow along as we're doing it. You might have to rewatch the video over and over to really get it. So Lambda is what we usually start with. Is taking an input, which is X. All right, and that X was sending my list. So we're sending the list that we've defined up there. All right, and then we're saying X times 2. We're simply just doing X times 2. So in here, we're not doing a Boolean. We're simply taking X times 2 and mapping that into a list. So the result is we're gonna iterate through this and then multiply everything by 2. So if I run this, we should see 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. All right, that's what we should be getting into our new list. And that's what this Lambda function is doing for us. All right, so if I give you a list and say multiply this list by itself, guys, if you had to do that manually by hand, it could be very, very, very time consuming for you to do, or you have to use a lot of if conditions or while conditions. Guys, Lambda functions allows us to do it very, very quickly. Now we've introduced concepts like maps and filters. If this doesn't make sense, I'll just encourage you to just spend a little bit of time to read up on them. Right, map really came from the idea of map reduce, and since we're talking about map, we could as well talk about the reduce function, which is what I had commented out here. So similar to the reduce function, instead of just mapping out the result, what this is gonna do is gonna sum the result into one value. So reduce list would be again Lambda, right? And then so Lambda xy, and what it's gonna do, it is going to simply add the two values together and return that. So this simply takes these values and says, okay, 1 plus 2, 3, 3 plus 3, 6, 6 plus 4, 10, 10 plus 5, 15, and that's what. So it's just simply going through and adding that, and then 5 plus 6, actually 15 plus 6, 21, 21 plus 7, 28, 28 plus 8, 30, 28 plus 8, 30 what? 36. For the, yeah, just simply add that, and I think it should be about 55, I believe. Let's print out reduce. So let's see what reduce is gonna give us. So we print out, yep, 55. So there we have it, so 55. And so reduce again is another function available within Lambda functions. It simply takes all the values within a list that you provide, and it kind of it applies the functions to it in a reducing faction, and it came from the background of map reduce. All right, so we're reducing the list. So guys, there you have it. I would encourage you to play around with these examples and really get your head around what's going on. This is the simplest that you can understand, or the map, but once you have a handle on it, guys, this will be a very powerful tool to have in your arsenal as a programmer. If somebody gives you a list of things and say apply this function to every items in that list, you can just simply map it and be able to transform every function or every item in that list without having to use a for loop.